Welcome. Welcome to the Osborne Group Chat. I'm Karen Osborne, Senior Strategist of the Osborne Group. And as you move from triage to transition, going back to reopening the offices, to transformation, we're going to talk about a topic that's going to help you do that: corporate philanthropy and strategic partnerships. And with me is a very special guest, actually, somebody I love, Angela Wiggins. Hey, Angela.
Hey, Karen.
I'm going to introduce Angela in a moment, but I wanted to first just say a couple of things. You know, we are in this triple threat pandemic. You know, we've got the virus, we've got the economy, cranking. I just saw a report that giving this first quarter is down across the country. And of course, we are in this moment, this amazing moment in history that is causing civil unrest, but also big, big change. So that's a lot for you to grapple with. We want to, through these Osborne Group chats, it is our hope to help you maneuver through and keep your program moving forward, because you've got so many people counting on you. You've got your staff, you've got all the people you serve, you've got your cause. You've got to keep moving, and we've got to keep hopeful. We're a very hopeful sector, aren't we? We are the optimists in the world, and we want to give you some tools to help you with that hope. So let me introduce you to my very special guest. I have known Angela for over 25 years, which seems impossible since she's like 25 years old. Doesn't seem like even remotely possible. And I'm going to read her bio so that I don't mess it up, that I don't get anything wrong. Angela brings more than 2 decades of experience in corporate philanthropy, strategic partnerships, and the nonprofit sector. She's previously held positions at Marriott International, Kraft Foods, Hasbro, and her work in the nonprofit sector. So she knows us from both sides. She knows us as a funder, and she knows us as a fundraiser. She worked for the Dance Theater of Harlem, where we met, and the Children's Health Fund. Angela lives in Washington, D.C. area and serves on several boards. So that's the third way that she knows us. She is an active philanthropist, volunteer, board member, including American Rivers and STEP Africa. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Karen. I'm excited to be here with you all today.
As we all know, we are in this unique moment, and there's a lot of, Angela, there's so much going on because of these 3 pandemics that we're in. Do you have any, before we do our deep dive, do you have any suggestions for our audience about what they should be doing, could be doing, like right this minute, or, well, after we hang up?
I do have some tips that I want to share, but first I want to say that, to your point, despite everything that is going on in the world around us and in our country, that I do also feel really hopeful. What I'm seeing now in the corporate and foundation space is that naturally funders are really trying to reinforce the organizations where they've made investments. In some cases, they're providing additional resources to help organizations bridge during this difficult time. And they're also acknowledging that there's a lot of programs that just can't happen right now. So in addition to schools being closed and facilities being closed, there's not a lot happening, and organizations that relied on volunteers aren't able to operate as well because of social distancing guidelines and safety concerns that are issued. So to be honest, there's not a lot happening programmatically. So shoring up the organizations where they've made investments is important. But I would say that for nonprofit organizations, if you haven't already done so, you should definitely reach out to those funders. Of course, they're experiencing the same, trauma and trying to navigate the situation just as we are. And so, offer to see if there's a way that you might be able to be helpful to them during this difficult time. And then, of course, I think funders want to know how you're doing. So you should definitely share with them how your organization is managing. So are you receiving, the PPP protection, payroll protection funding, or has your organization received a SBA loan, or maybe there's cost savings. But either way, I think organizations want to know, or funders want to know how you're doing. So those would be my 3 suggestions for what you should do right now.
Yes, thank you. Excellent advice. Because the Osborne Group has been urging all of our clients to reach out to their funders now. So I hope that everybody is just nodding as they listen to you. But if you're not, get going. Call them. So I want you to go back to the time when you were, any of the many times when you were on the funding side, and you felt like you were just doing your best work as a funder for not-for-profits. What did that look like?
That's a great question, Karen. So when I worked in corporate philanthropy at both Kraft Foods and the Hasbro Children's Foundation, I have to say it was probably the most rewarding professional experiences of my life. And I say that because what I appreciated most was being able to leverage corporate resources and talent, and then to be able to work with organizations that were really trying to drive societal change. So the mix of the two just made it probably some of the most rewarding work that I think that I've done. Many of those organizations were tackling big issues, whether it was health disparities or food insecurity or low education outcomes in underserved areas. They were all really striving to push the needle. And a lot of those organizations, even today, are considered national models. Some of them have been organizations a lot of you guys have heard of. So Feeding America and the Harlem Children's Zone and Figure Skating in Harlem. So I would say that those were the organizations that I enjoyed partnering with because their relationships were very strategic.
So wow, that's quite a spread in size and scope and purpose. Can you give me an example of one and what that relationship was like?
Yeah, so you're right. They were all very different organizations in different stages of development and capacity. But I would say that there were 3 elements that made all of those partnerships really successful. So the first is that we partnered with organizations where there was mission alignment. So where the organization was doing work was also consistent with our corporate funding priorities and where we wanted to have a presence in the space. I would say the second most important element was that it was more than just money. So it wasn't just the financial support, which we know is important and critical for nonprofits, but the partnership was much deeper and much more expansive than that.
I always remember I started my career in corporate relations, and employee engagement was so critical, and still is today, such an important part of a relationship with a not-for-profit for many companies, not all, but for many. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I would say while I was at Kraft Foods, Feeding America was our most strategic partner. And when you talk about employee engagement, we were able to leverage that throughout the entire corporation. So we had opportunities to put senior leaders on boards of directors in local communities. We were able to be a source of a pipeline for ongoing volunteer support for a lot of local food banks. We offered product donation. We brought in capacity building and technical support. So I would say that being able to showcase employee involvement was really huge because we were able to also leverage the storytelling. So we were able to hear how our employees were making a difference in the community and how communities were able to partner with big corporations like Kraft Foods.
Yeah, when I was director of corporate relations at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, we also, because it was an education, an educational institution, we also were able to offer access to our students. Internships were very important, as well as the corporate leaders being able to find out more about faculty research. So there's lots of ways, just depending on what kind of organization you are, what kind of institution you are, that you can involve employees of corporations with your mission. And that's a great way to find a lot of other donors too, individual donors, because those volunteers can turn out to love, love, love you. But you said there were 3 success factors, and
Right.
yes, what's the third one?
So the third one is innovation. So companies are always trying to drive innovation within their own organizations. And we want to see that with our nonprofit partners too. So we want to see that they're looking at innovative strategies to tackle pressing societal issues. So a lot of the areas where we funded, and I think of as an example, I think of Hasbro, for example. So we were a corporate foundation that really wanted to focus on funding for innovative programs or programs that had the ability to be best practice or national models or had the ability to be scalable. So, we didn't have tons of money, but the best way for us to leverage our dollars was to find, best in class programs. And, one example of innovation that really comes to mind was an organization at the time that was a startup nonprofit called Boundless Playgrounds. And so Boundless Playgrounds was set out to create these fully accessible play spaces so that children who had physical disabilities were able to play alongside children that didn't have physical disabilities and not compromise the joy of play. So they did a lot of research on what accessible play looks like. And so our funding really helped them develop the model for what these playgrounds should look like. Basically, what are the toys and activities, and then how do you replicate that and then scale it. And to this day, I think the organization has helped more than 200 communities build these fully accessible playgrounds. So kids don't even know they're accessible. They just know that they can all play regardless of what the abilities are. So if you're a child in a wheelchair, you can be playing alongside in the same, playground space with a child who isn't, and everybody's having a great time. So it was just an opportunity that they were really pushing something innovative. So we wanted to be a part of that, and we wanted to help them build a model that allowed them to go beyond just their local community.
I love that story. I love that story. I've been in accessible gyms as well when, yeah, that are just so, because, if you're in a wheelchair, you still have to do cardio. And, how do you do that? And that's a great example. Thank you so much. So now let's do the other side of the table. What did you expect when you were being a funder? What did you expect from us, from the not-for-profits that you were working with, partnering with?
So I would say there were 3 things that we focused on. So the first, of course, was information. So we wanted to be kept abreast of how the program was running. Were there challenges, other opportunities, or maybe there were ways that, the funder could actually be helpful to the organization. So we wanted to be informed, and it doesn't always have to be the formal, we have to wait until we get a report. I think funders love to hear from their nonprofit partners, whether it's a phone call or maybe you're calling to share a story about, a success. I mean, we want to hear that. We hunger for that. So I would say information, of course, was the first thing that we wanted. And then again, we wanted to be engaged. So we wanted to know that we were really partnering with our organizations to really drive social impact and success. So if there was an area where the organization needed some additional support. So maybe they are struggling with developing a marketing plan to roll out an initiative, or maybe they needed some assistance around strategic planning. But corporations have just a tremendous amount of resource and talent. So we were able to, as an engaged partner, say, well, we've got some folks in HR that can help you develop the strategic plan to, onboard, new volunteers or whatever the issue was. We wanted to feel engaged and part of the solution. And then lastly, I would say that accountability, of course, is important. So we wanted to make sure that our nonprofit partners were really being good stewards of the resources that we were providing. And so we wanted to be able to measure the progress that you've made. We want to be able to evaluate it, and we need to be able to communicate it. And I say that because corporations, of course, are accountable to shareholders and employees. So the more that we can tout the great work that you're doing and to share it more broadly across our platforms was always very important to us as a corporate funder.
It's so interesting. 2 points that you made that I just really stand out for me. One is that so many of our not-for-profits don't develop relationships like what you are describing. They just go to the marketing department and ask for sponsorships for the latest event, and missing the richness of bringing big ideas, bringing exciting ideas, and bringing engagement opportunities, and just really partnering with the organization. And then, of course, accountability and stewardship is just so important. And if only the only thing you do is send in the report, you're really missing an opportunity. Yeah. So those were just excellent points. There's a lot of buzz out now, especially because of the economic problems, but it's actually been trending for a while, of some foundations. I don't know if it's been in the corporate world, and I'd like your thoughts about this, encouraging not-for-profits to work together to solve a societal problem. You know, all of us are working on the same thing, and we're all trying to raise money for the same purpose. And have you ever experienced that? Did you ever encourage people to, just partner and work together?
Well, that's actually a great question, Karen, and I want to share two statistics. So the first is that according to the National Center for Charitable Statistics, there are 1.5 million nonprofit organizations registered in the United States. And in 2018, Americans gave 427 billion, corporations gave 20 billion, and foundations gave 75 billion. And so the truth is, the corporate and foundation world is such a small fraction of the funding that's actually even available to nonprofit organizations. And it also just reminds me there's an incredible amount of duplication of services. So, you've got 10 organizations in the same neighborhood all providing the same type of service. And it's not that they're not each needed. I just know that there's a limited amount of funding dollars to go around to support all of them. But I will say that, as a funder, we often introduced organizations to each other that may not have known the other partner was there. We convened philanthropic networks so that we could talk about these issues. So to be able to bring 3 or 4 other funders to the tables, like how do we tackle health disparities in this neighborhood? And I believe that there's a lot of power in collective thought leadership. So it was important to bring people to the table. But as a funder, we didn't encourage these two organizations, like you really have to work together, unless it was something that we were funding. So we wanted to provide opportunities for introduction, opportunities for thought leadership, and to bring people to the table. But we weren't the type of funder that was trying to fund organizations working together.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm seeing community foundations doing that more, I think, than corporations, really asking and encouraging organizations to not only work together, but to apply for grants jointly that are solving a societal problem. So it'll be interesting to see how the trend keeps going and what happens next. One of the things you and I have talked about in the past that I wanted to make sure we mention today is this whole notion of strategic partnerships. And again, it seems to be a trending concept. And I wonder if you would, how do you think about strategic partnerships? How would you define that?
So I would define a strategic partnership as a significant relationship that really drives business results. And so I would say that for us, a strategic relationship was one where there was a significant amount of investment, engagement, as well as expectation. But it's still a relationship. But I think of it as a much more purposeful relationship with a not-for-profit organization.
More purposeful because there's a strategy around it.
So there's a strategy, and that it also is really mission aligned, right? So if, at Kraft Foods, our focus was on, eradicating food insecurity. So we wanted to partner with organizations that were really working to do that. So for us, the mission alignment part of it was important. But again, and as a result of that, because of that tight mission alignment, the amount of investment that Kraft Foods made into Feeding America was huge. It was a complex relationship. We interacted with them on a variety of different levels. It was volunteers, it was product donation, it was capacity building, it was employee engagement. It was all of those things. So again, to me, a strategic relationship is one that is deeper, more complex, but also has a higher level of expectation as well.
Yeah, yeah. Another topic that you and I have been talking about, uh, and and you can't not talk about it now with all that's going on in the world, and that is, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That just becomes more important as a board leader, more important as a not-for-profit leader, and when you are thinking about funding, um, how does DEI play into the calculus?
So that's a huge area now, Karen. I think as the country goes through this bit of awakening, I think corporations and foundations are also doing the same thing. And I think DEI is an area that's been largely untapped by a lot of not-for-profit organizations. And I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. And I think of an example, while I was at Marriott International at Marriott Hotels, folks in the LGBTQ community are a good portion of the employees that we have. They're a good portion of our workforce. And so we partnered with a lot of organizations, nonprofits, that actually worked in the LGBTQ space. And in addition to sponsorship dollars, I mean, we hosted, pride events. There was opportunities for program support. There was, marketing opportunities. So I do think as corporations want to show themselves more in this DEI space, I think organizations that have appropriate programs that, align with those company missions that drive company culture and values and engagement. I think it's important for not-for-profits to think about how do we help organizations demonstrate authentic leadership in this space in a way that both drives their corporate strategies, but also drives the programs that you have around, especially equity and inclusion and diversity, in all honesty. All three areas are just really important.
And an opportunity that people
Yeah,
are probably
absolutely.
not thinking about. So some of our audience, today are sophisticated, big operations, who've been doing this for a long time. And some are smaller, newer.
Mm-hmm.
If I were the CEO, a board leader, a director of development, and we haven't, we don't have any traction in this area, where would I get started? How would I just begin?
So I would just suggest organizations just continue to stay focused on, their mission and what their organization priorities are, and then, look for areas of alignment. So companies who are trying to play in the space where you're trying to have an impact, I think are going to be your most natural partners. And I think don't be afraid to actually develop, like, what are those big ideas? What's the innovation? Like, how do you really tackle, health disparities or, low education outcomes in your community? Like, how do you really do that in a meaningful way that's different and sort of disruptive and somewhat of a breakthrough? I think we're all hungry for new solutions. We've done a lot. We've invested a lot in the nonprofit sector. I think companies and corporate and foundation funders are both looking for, like, what are some new ways that we can really, make progress in this area? We're all tired of talking about the same things over and over again. And I think we're recognizing that there needs to be systemic change, across this entire country. But how does your organization carve out what's that space that you have the best opportunity to make the biggest impact, and then find those companies and foundations that are interested in those areas, and then bring the big ideas to them. Say, you know what, we want to be bold. We want to really tackle this issue, and here's how we want to do it, and here's why you should be our partner.
I love that advice. I love that advice. Everybody knows we talk a lot about big ideas at the Osborne Group, and that is exactly right. So we're almost out of time, which I could just talk to you for hours. I do talk to you for hours and
We
hours,
do.
but I could keep on talking to you today. And is there anything that you just want to leave us with? Anything that you've already said that you want to emphasize, or something new, but just something you want our audience to remember?
just the simple concept that strategic partnerships really benefit both parties. And so it's not that nonprofits, shouldn't feel like they're bringing a lot to the table, because they are. And so just remembering that if you really want strategic partnerships with funders and corporations, just really, look at ways that you can partner together in the true sense of the word, and in a way that's just really authentic to who you are and to who the company is. So it absolutely needs to be authentic, especially in such a crowded space where everyone's trying to get the same message out, and it's falling on deaf ears because it's not really true to who they are. And, people know that. So just look for authentic ways to really develop those meaningful partnerships where you walk away with a significant impact to your organization, and companies feel that they're walking away with something that they can share with their shareholders and their employees.
That is excellent, excellent advice. Authenticity and alignment. So words to live by. I'm sorry that we are at the end of our time together for this talk. I'm so grateful to Angela for joining us and sharing her years of expertise and experience with us. If you have any questions, please reach out, mail@theosbornegroup.com. If you missed any of this, you can catch it on our website, theosbornegroup.com website, and also on my YouTube channel, Karen E. Osborne. You be safe out there. Wear your mask. Take care. We'll see you next time.